It is the winter of 2013 in this part of Seoul. Even the fallen leaves make a dry, hollow sound. Before I tell you this story, you need to know one thing. Apgujeong. Most people outside Korea have never heard this name. But if you have ever walked down Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, or Bond Street in London, or the Champs-Élysées in Paris, you already understand Apgujeong. It is a district in the heart of Gangnam, Seoul, where a single block can hold more luxury boutiques than most cities see in their entire downtown. Hermès, Chanel, Dior. Not department store versions, standalone boutiques, where the staff knows your name before you walk in. And in the middle of Apgujeong, there is a salon. No sign outside, no website, no walk-ins. You come here only if someone who already comes here brings you. I have worked in this salon for over 20 years. I have held scissors behind people who run companies, who own buildings, who make decisions that the rest of the country feels the next morning. And there is one chair that has no number. Not chair 1, not chair 2. Seat 0. No one sits here, it simply exists. In the quietest corner of the room where the light does not quite reach. And it remembers everything. This is where I will tell you this story from. Not as a judge, not as a witness called to testify, just as the chair that was always there. Her name in this story is Mrs. Lee. She has been coming to this salon for over 10 years. She does not talk much when she sits down. She looks at the mirror and says only what needs to be said. Nothing more. But after 10 years, you learn to read the silence. How her hands rest on her bag, which way her shoulders lean, when she holds her breath. Mrs. Lee's son ran a Cuban cigar import company. In 2010, there was still a thick wall between the United States and Cuba. Her grandchild was born there, not yet 5 years old. Still so young. Mrs. Lee had one worry. In Cuba, she could not send this child to a proper school. So the place she chose was Hawaii. Before her grandchild was old enough for school, she would lay the foundation first. She had a vision, a garden for her grandchild, a house with floor-to-ceiling windows, a terrace where her son's circle could gather, and a lounge chair that belonged only to her. Every December, her son's family would leave for Hawaii. Mrs. Lee went with them, January, February, until the winter was over. Mrs. Lee said it herself, the standard for money spent on my own is different. This is not a house, it must be a fortress, to hold up the lives of my son's family. Into that space, a woman slipped in. Suji. To understand Suji, you need to understand one neighborhood in Los Angeles, Hancock Park. It sits just west of Koreatown in Los Angeles, but it is a different world entirely. Private golf courses built into residential estates, Tudor mansions behind iron gates, streets so quiet you can hear your own footsteps. Suji used to belong there. Not anymore. What remained was only the manners her body had absorbed. Polite speech, restrained tips, a white Porsche, hands that never counted change. And one more thing, for Korean families who came to spend their winters in Hawaii, she introduced schools, connected them to homes and cars. That was what she did. A woman who had found a way to survive from the place where she had lost everything. On the outside, December 2010, Hawaii, a Christmas party. A gathering of people who had come from Korea. Names from the business world, names from medicine, names from culture. And in that room was Suji. Everyone knew Suji. Oh, Suji, did you put this party together again? Suji smiled and said, "It's nothing. Just having everyone here is enough." Suji was the one who smiled most in that room, the first to rise and refill someone's glass. If someone looked uncomfortable, she was already there. The Koreans would say, Hawaii wouldn't work without Suji. From golf reservations to cruise trips, she handles everything. She used to be very well off, you know. No one suspected a thing. There was no reason to. And it was at that party that Mrs. Lee and Suji first met. Suji approached first. "Oh, we haven't met before, have we? I'm Suji. Is this your first time here?" Mrs. Lee replied, "Yes, my son lives here." Suji widened her eyes and said, "Oh, your son is here? I thought I hadn't seen you before. Is this your first time in Hawaii?" Mrs. Lee nodded. Suji continued without missing a beat. "Then I think I can be of help. I know the Korean community here quite well. Please don't hesitate to ask for anything. To extend your hand so naturally to someone you've just met. How much practice must that take? Or perhaps it was simply something she was born with." After that day, Suji stayed naturally by Mrs. Lee's side. Before Mrs. Lee's eyes turned toward something, Suji was already there. Before Mrs. Lee opened her mouth, Suji was already speaking. Golf reservations, restaurant seats, cruise schedules, party invitations. Before Mrs. Lee could even feel discomfort, Suji had already taken care of it. Mrs. Lee was not comfortable with English. She could have asked her son. But she did not want to do that in front of him. Showing that she needed to lean on her own child. That was something her pride would not allow. Suji knew this. Without a word being said, she knew. There was a moment, at the golf club lounge. An American man in their group said something rude directed at Mrs. Lee. Mrs. Lee did not fully understand the words, but she understood the atmosphere. In that moment, Suji stood up. In clear, deliberate English, she faced that man. Her voice was quiet, but she did not back down. The man was the first to leave. Suji turned toward Mrs. Lee and said, "Are you all right? You don't need to pay attention to people like that." Mrs. Lee said nothing. But from that day on, the warmth in Mrs. Lee's eyes, when she looked at Suji, was different. To have someone stand up for you, she had lived her whole life. Without hardship, without betrayal. Which is why that warmth sank so deeply. Suji's reach was wide. In the Korean community in Hawaii, there was no one who didn't know Suji. The people Suji introduced were always people of standing. Business, medicine, law. One day, Suji introduced someone to Mrs. Lee's son, a man who held the signing rights for the Korean distribution of Cuban cigars. From that point, her son's business began to change. Her son did not know, between his mother and Suji, there was a river of money quietly flowing. To her son, Suji was the person who had grown his business. So, his mother trusting Suji felt completely natural. Suji had not only taken Mrs. Lee, she had taken the son too, in one move. Surely, this person could not be deceiving me. Even that thought was impossible to have. People believe what they want to believe, and the deeper the belief, the further suspicion hides. Suji knew this. Mrs. Lee was sincere. That spring, when she returned to Seoul, Mrs. Lee prepared something herself. Rami bedding, commissioned at great expense, from a master craftsman. Rami clothing, kimchi she had made with her own hands. She sent it all by air. Suji sent an email. "Ma'am, what is all this? You really didn't have to. I am so deeply moved." Mrs. Lee replied briefly, "It's nothing, as long as you received it well." That was Mrs. Lee's way. Not words, but the heart delivered through the hands. I only learned this later, that on the day Suji received that package, she made a phone call to someone. What was said in that call, I do not know. There is no way to know. But the temperature of the email Suji sent that day was too perfect. A perfect sentence is sometimes the most dangerous sentence. What is given with sincerity and what is given with calculation in the moment of receiving cannot be told apart. The weight of Rami bedding finished by a master craftsman and the weight of a single line in Suji's email cannot be placed on the same scale. But the temperature of the hands that sent them was entirely different. December 2011, Mrs. Lee returned to Hawaii. There was a cruise, a terrace restaurant, an evening on the water. One of Suji's acquaintances looked at Mrs. Lee's neck and asked, "Ma'am, is that a new piece?" Mrs. Lee smiled and said, "No, just a pretty design I was drawn to. It's quite old, actually." Suji quietly noted that moment. A few days later, a birthday gift arrived for Mrs. Lee. A Bulgari Allegra collection necklace, white gold with diamond flower petals, far more elaborate than what Mrs. Lee had been wearing. Suji said, "The expensive thing is the feeling behind it, for someone like you. I only want to give beautiful things." Mrs. Lee believed those words. Suji must have gone home and written down that one sentence from the cruise. What makes her eyes stop, what loosens her hands, what lowers her guard. The Bulgari Allegra was not a gift, it was an investment. That night, Suji slipped away for a moment. She took out her lipstick. Slowly, very slowly, she drew her lip line again. And looking at herself in the mirror, she smiled quietly. "That's enough for today." In a hotel lounge in Hawaii, Suji spoke first. "Ma'am, Hawaii real estate is complicated. The local laws are different. All contracts are written in English. I can help through a local expert I know." Mrs. Lee asked, "Is it really that complicated?" Suji answered seriously. "Especially properties like this with ocean views. Without a local network, you can't even get access. Someone I know can handle everything from contracts to interior consulting." Mrs. Lee thought for a moment. Then she said, "Give me the account number." Suji carefully wrote a number down from her notepad and handed it over. "Please take your time and decide. I'm not in a rush." Mrs. Lee decided immediately. "How much?" Suji steadied her breath and said, "For the initial deposit, about 30 million won should secure the location." To Mrs. Lee, 30 million won was about the cost of one golf trip. It was a small beginning. But something strange happened. Spring 2011, Mrs. Lee had returned to Seoul on her birthday. A package arrived from Hawaii. A premium fruit basket, photos of the grandchild, photos from a school tour. In the letter it said, "Happy birthday, ma'am. Our family's new home in Hawaii. I hope it will be completed." As the Seoul spring passed, emails kept coming. "Ma'am, the construction permit came through today. I'm attaching the garden design. Your grandchildren will love it." Another email came from Suji. "How are you feeling, ma'am? Seoul air is so dry this time of year. Please take care of your throat. I sent some manuka honey I found here in Hawaii." Mrs. Lee was moved once again. Spring 2012, Seoul, an email arrived. "Ma'am, the material costs came in higher than expected. The Italian marble you wanted is expensive. This time it looks like we'll need about 120 million won." Mrs. Lee hesitated for a moment. "We're already over 200 million. Another email came from Suji. "Ma'am, I really tried my best to cut costs, but for your grandchildren, we can't use cheap materials." Mrs. Lee transferred the money. Autumn 2012, early 2013, the emails kept coming. Garden landscaping, furniture and interiors, additional construction permit fees, final finishing materials. "Every time," Suji said, "this is truly the last one. We're almost done." Like that, over 3 years. 1,320 million won had flowed away. It was spring 2013, the day she waited for an email as usual. No reply came. Mrs. Lee at first did not think much of it. She must be busy. Hawaii has a time difference. 1 day passed. 2 days passed. A week passed. Mrs. Lee made a call, no connection. She sent another email. "The address does not exist." Could something have happened? Could there have been an accident? Mrs. Lee searched for local contacts in Hawaii, the expert Suji had introduced, the real estate agent, the interior firm. Not one. Connected, from the beginning, numbers that had never existed. Mrs. Lee called her son. "Hello, son." Her son spoke first. "Mom, have you been well?" "Oh, right. Thanks to Suji, another big deal just came through. She's truly someone to be grateful for." Mrs. Lee swallowed what she had been about to say. "Yes, that's good." She ended the call. She was alone. Even her family did not know. She had to carry this weight, alone. Mrs. Lee sat for a long time, without a word. Not anger, not tears, neither. The moment a person truly collapses, makes no sound. Mrs. Lee set down the phone, and then, something falling onto the back of her hand, she noticed for the first time. Neither hot nor cold, just wet. It was spring 2013. The hands that had sent Raimi bedding, finished by a master craftsman, were now staring at an empty screen, an address that does not exist. 3 years had vanished. After that, Mrs. Lee never brought up Hawaii again. Only, sometimes, when she looked at photos of her grandchild, her hands trembled. And the scent of Dior J'adore, after that winter, never filled the salon again. It was a day of spring rain. It was the spring of 2013. Madame Lee took her seat at chair 1. She removed her coat, Chanel tweed, a spring collection in ivory and beige. Her bag was a Hermès Birkin 35 in Etoupe Togo leather. She set it down on the table without a sound. As I draped the cape around her, I looked at Madame Lee in the mirror. Today, she was looking out the window. Not at the rain. Just at something far away. At nothing at all. I spoke first. "How have you been lately?" Madame Lee slowly turned her gaze to the mirror. And very quietly, she spoke. "My grandchild is old enough for school now." Hawaii. When that word appeared, I did not stop cutting. I kept moving as if nothing had happened. But inside my mind, something switched on. I spoke as casually as I could. "Ma'am, when you mention Hawaii, someone comes to mind. Do you know a woman named Suji who used to live there?" Madame Lee's eyes stopped for half a second in the mirror. And then they were calm again. Too quickly, too perfectly, which made it more frightening. Madame Lee asked slowly, "Suji?" I kept the scissors moving as I spoke. "Yes, she's from Hancock Park in LA. She was active in the Korean community in Hawaii, drives a white Porsche. She comes here sometimes." Madame Lee said nothing for a moment. She looked out the window. Streams of rain were running down the glass. 3 seconds. I do not know what happened inside those 3 seconds, but when they passed, Madame Lee's shoulders dropped, just slightly, and then rose again. Madame Lee looked at the mirror. She looked at me, and she spoke. "That woman, does she still come here?" I answered briefly. "Yes, she comes occasionally." Madame Lee looked out the window again. The rain had grown a little stronger, and very quietly she said, "I know we don't take same-day bookings, but when that woman makes an appointment, let me know." It was a command dressed as a request. I knew that what she said had nothing to do with hair. From that moment on, this salon had already become a different place. 10 days passed. A booking inquiry came in from Suji. I picked up the phone. "Of course, I'll book you in." After I hung up, I set down my scissors for a moment. I thought once more about the rule of this place. What is heard at chair 1 ends at chair 1. But what I was about to do was standing right on the edge of that rule. I sent a message to Madame Lee, just 1 line. "This afternoon, it's set." The reply was 4 characters. Understood. Suji arrived first, a white Porsche, not a single scratch on it. She pushed open the salon door and walked in. The scent entered first. Dior J'adore. The moment the door opened, the entire salon filled with that scent. I was holding my scissors, and I thought, this scent, Madame Lee will smell it today as well. The moment Suji stepped inside, she was carrying a Galleria department store shopping bag. A luxury paper bag tied elegantly with a ribbon. She smiled brightly right away. That smile was to hide a trembling. Suji opened the Galleria shopping bag and took out Dior J'adore hand creams one by one. Ladies, I picked up some hand cream for everyone at the department store. The same polished tone as always, the same performance of a generous benefactor. She handed a Dior J'adore hand cream to each member of staff, naturally, as if handing out sweets. But I knew those hand creams were bought with that money. Money saved to build a son's home, spent on a counterfeit life. Today again, Suji reigned before the mirror like a queen, smiling, wearing the scent, distributing gifts as if everything were perfectly normal. But that scent and those hand creams were already her final performance. Suji sat down in the chair beside chair 1. She looked in the mirror and swept her hair back, the face of someone who knew nothing. Suji had not the faintest idea what this space was about to become today. 20 minutes passed. The salon door opened. It was Madame Lee, a spring coat, a lilac silk scarf. Her steps were quiet, no different from any other day, which made them heavier. Suji caught that reflection in the mirror. Her hand stopped for an instant, 0.3 of a second. But then she smiled. Oh, Madame Lee. Madame Lee smiled too. Oh, Suji, you're here. Two smiles overlapped in the mirror. They appeared to be the same temperature, but they were entirely different. One woman did not know. One woman did. Madame Lee took her seat at chair 1, right beside Suji. Two faces appeared side by side in the mirror. I picked up my scissors. 20 minutes. Their conversation was unsettling. Golf. I hear the course at Suwon Country Club is lovely these days. Jeju is too windy. The weather in Hawaii is perfect this time of year, not humid at all. Real estate in Gangnam. I hear Cheongdam is rising again. I can't even remember when the prices were low. Family news. Your grandchild must be starting school soon? Children grow up so fast. And then the subject of the scent came up. Madame Lee smiled as she spoke. Suji, are you still wearing that scent? Suji smiled as she answered. Of course, Madame Lee, you told only me about it. I'm wearing it right now. It was Dior J'adore. The scent Madame Lee had supposedly shared with Suji alone. It filled the salon that day. Suji added with a smile. The school districts in Hawaii have more to consider than you'd think. I looked into it quite a bit when I was there. Just let me know if you ever need help. Madame Lee nodded. Yes, I received a great deal of help back then. That one sentence hung in the air. Suji did not hear it. She let it pass. That was Suji's final mistake. 20 minutes passed, and the conversation fell briefly silent. The salon grew quiet. Madame Lee slowly, very slowly, lifted her left wrist. She looked at her watch, a Van Cleef & Arpels Lady Arpels Pont des Amours watch. Its elegant diamond setting was drinking in the light. And then, very slowly, she began to remove the watch. The sound of the leather strap sliding from her wrist. It was small, but the entire salon heard it. The watch came to rest on the table. The faintest sound of metal meeting glass. Madame Lee looked down at her own fingertips, her manicured nails gleaming perfectly, but those fingertips were trembling, ever so slightly. And then, she looked at Suji in the mirror. Suji was still smiling, but that smile was slowly beginning to harden. Madame Lee's lips moved very slowly. So, Suji, what are you going to do about my son's house? That one sentence tore through the air of the salon. The sound of the hairdryer stopped. The sound of scissors stopped. Even the sound of breathing stopped. Suji's face, in the mirror, went white, went transparent. Her lips opened, closed, opened again. Madam Lee, that is... Madam Lee said nothing. She simply kept looking at Suji in the mirror. That gaze was stripping away everything that Suji was. For 10 years, I had stood at this chair and witnessed people explode in rage, people weep and beg, people kneel and plead. But that day, Suji's expression was none of those things. It was a living person for the very first time, feeling the full weight of what they had done with every part of their body. Suji's right hand slowly moved to her left wrist. A Bulgari Allegra watch. With trembling fingers, she undid the strap. The watch dropped onto the table, and then the Damiani earrings at both ears. Star-set diamonds, sparkling, she removed them, one by one. Madam Lee, please, take these at least. I'm sorry, truly, truly sorry. Madam Lee never once looked down at those items. Her gaze remained fixed solely on Suji in the mirror. And then, very slowly, she slid the watch and earrings back toward Suji. Without a sound, even the gesture of pushing them away was graceful. Madam Lee opened her mouth. I don't avoid filth out of fear. I avoid it because it's beneath me. All the tips you spread around in this place, the cosmetics, the luxury bags, all of it, was the money meant for my son's house? Suji was holding her breath, holding it, until finally a small broken sound escaped. Madam Lee continued, her voice still, low, and calm. And that scent. The one who first told you about it was me, did you know that? That one sentence brought down everything Suji was. Suji could not lift her head, her shoulders slowly sank. She became smaller, smaller still. Madam Lee spoke for the last time. Put those back on and get out of my sight. That money, consider it payment for the shroud you'll wear on your final journey. Never let me see you again. Suji could say nothing more. She simply, with trembling hands, gathered up the watch and earrings. She held her bag, as if clinging to it, and then she walked toward the door. Each step was heavy. The steps she had taken coming in were the steps of someone who knew nothing. The steps she took going out were the steps of someone who would know everything, forever. The door closed. The salon grew quiet again. Only the rain tapped against the glass. The scent of Dior J'adore still lingered. Slowly, very slowly, it was fading. This time, forever. Madam Lee looked at the mirror. She smoothed the strand of hair with her hand, and she looked at me. Continue. I picked up my scissors. I said nothing, as the rule of this place demands. When the appointment was over, Madam Lee put on her coat. She picked up her Birkin. She set cash on the table without a word, and she left. She did not take an umbrella. It was raining that day. Quite hard. But Madam Lee simply walked out. Later, I thought about it alone. What must Madam Lee have thought that night? Courtrooms, journalists, whispers. To avoid all of that. To keep this silence. She must have known that was the more valuable victory. 2 months passed. Madam Lee came again. She sat at chair 1 as always. That day the salon happened to be empty. Just Madam Lee and me. Madam Lee began to speak, very quietly. It was 1.3 billion won. Money I sent over 3 years, a little at a time, to build my son's house in Hawaii. Suji, she took that money in Hawaii and came back to Korea. The place she ran to was Apgujeong. I asked carefully, Madam Lee, But why didn't you pursue it legally, with a sum that large? Madam Lee looked at my eyes in the mirror for a moment, and very calmly she said, "Listen, if that woman lives well on that money, then I simply gave it to her." "But Madam Lee, 1.3 billion. But if that woman spends the rest of her life in fear, that is my revenge. Either way, I have lost nothing, because I am still here, sitting in this chair, and no one can speak my name carelessly." In that moment, I understood. What is the truly expensive price for the people who sit in this chair? It is not money. It is having your name appear in a search, having your choices judged in comment sections, becoming the subject of other people's conversations. That is the real price. The money Suji took has now become something heavy around her neck. Every time a certain scent reaches her, every time she passes through the streets of Apgujeong, every time she opens the door of a fine restaurant, it will push her into fear and dread. Every time Suji enters a department store, she will have to look over her shoulder, in case someone there knows Madam Lee. Every time she swings a club on a golf course, she will feel eyes on her back. The perfume Suji wears has now become a curse. Dior, J'adore. The scent Madam Lee had shared with Suji alone. Now every time Suji wears it, she will remember. That money did not give Suji freedom. Instead, it became a chain she will wear for life. Suji must live as a fugitive. Apgujeong, Cheongdam, Hanam, Galleria. The mere sound of those words will make her heart drop. Madam Lee's elegant choice was completed in exactly this way. No courts, no police, no headlines, only silence, and one sentence was enough. The salon returned to its ordinary days. Another client sat in this chair. New stories arrived at the other chairs. But this chair knows that none of those stories ever truly left this space, that they are recorded in the silence. Seat 0 does not judge, it simply remembers, quietly, the choices people make and what becomes of them. What would you have done? Standing again before someone who had taken 1.3 billion from you. Would you choose rage? Or would you choose silence? That choice will say everything about who you are. What this chair remembers today ends here. This was Seat 0.